They got it now? Okay. But I really believe that everybody during his coaching career sometime should have to coach the secondary. I mean, you know, then you figure out what pressure really is and all those things that go with playing back there. Because you got the one team, you got the one segment on defense that's exposed, you know, where everybody can see it. And if a guy makes a mistake, he can play a perfect game except for one play, and then everybody sees that. And, you know, the first thing they start talking about a lot of times is, hey, who's coaching those guys? You know, that's when they say the coach is trying to get up the press box or crawl under the bench or whatever. But I think it takes a special kind of guy to do it. We've got a really good young secondary coach now. A young man named Bobby Elliott. His daddy was Bump Elliott. Bump was our AD for many years. Bump was the head coach at Michigan and has played, coached, and done everything in the Rose Bowl. We're very fortunate to get him. But he has to spend all of his time, you know, with those guys because the offenses that we're meeting nowadays, and I mean it's a round-the-clock job. We try to do this to start with, and these are things that are we feel are very, very important, or I wouldn't take up your time by going over them. But we think that you've got to establish a few goals with those guys right off. You got team goals, and each individual coach has got his own goals. But we think it's very important that you establish goals. The first thing we say is this. We may not be the most talented group back there. We may not have all the speed in the world or all those kind of things, but we could be the best tackling secondary in the Big Ten. So that's our basic thing that we try to tell those guys, you know, that we want to be the best tackling secondary in the Big Ten. And I will go over with you in a minute, hopefully if we have time, our breakdown in an open field and what we call our stovepipe position. In other words, when that play breaks the line of scrimmage, whether it's inside or outside, then we refer to that area that he breaks in as a stovepipe, like he's just running down a pipe. And we want to get those defensive backs all around what we call that stovepipe. We want to get them in what we call the stovepipe position. And then go from there. First thing we think you've got to teach them as far as being a good tackling secondary is the position they must take on the ball carrier. We're talking about all four guys. Because as you know, there's not many guys that can tackle a real good back one-on-one in an open field. You know, you just can't do it because that guy knows where he's going and all those kind of things. But we think this, and we're very adamant about this with our people. If you get a certain position on a guy and you don't have to tackle him except if he comes to you, then you've got a chance to be a pretty good tackling guy. You know, but you can't be a good tackler just if it's got to be an individual thing. I don't mean we don't work on that. Of course, that happens a lot. But if you get the right position on the ball carrier with all those guys, then you got a chance for your guys to be a very good tackling secondary. And then this is a very simple, basic principle, and about the only thing that Coach Fry will get involved with when he looks at a film defensively. You know, he may come in to me on Sunday morning and we might have played a great defensive game, and he might say, hey, you guys played good, but I saw 5 guys when I looked at the film this morning put their head behind the ball carrier. You know, he didn't say what defense were you in or this or that, you know. But that's from his thinking down through the years, you know. So that's very, very important. Break down an open field, get the stovepipe position, and get your head in the proper position. As you guys know now, we never talk about, or we don't for sure, we never talk about tackling with the head anymore. We've taken that part totally out of the ball game, which I think we should, because that's where you get a lot of injuries. But it's very, very important on head placement. We try to have a goal of getting 20 Oskies or interceptions for a season. And that's pretty hard because nearly all quarterbacks nowadays, all good quarterbacks that we face, and I know you guys too, are at least, I mean, the worst quarterback we'll face will be a 50% completion game. And all of them are 50% or better, and a lot of them, and our guys, you know, the way we teach our completion guys. So to be able to get 20 Oskies a year, and we got 18 this year, I believe. We really got 19, but one of them was on an extra point. They don't count that in statistics, but that's a high goal for us right there. You know, we try to strive to get that. We think it's very, very important to play the quarterback size, know when to gamble. You know, if you got a short zone and it's going to be a 5-yard gain and you gamble and don't make the play, well, we'll pat you on the back for that, because you got the nerve to go after it. But if you got a deep zone back there, you got to know when you can gamble and when you can't gamble. Every good defensive secondary expects to intercept the ball. Boy, when you get a bunch of guys, you know, we hate to have a guy. I would hate to have a guy back there that looks out there and says, gosh, I hope they don't throw this one in a critical situation. You know, we want that guy back there that's saying, I don't care what they do, but I sure hope they throw it in my zone. That's the kind of guy that you want back there. Guys that expect Oskies, and then, once again, teach them how to strip the ball, because you're going to get completions on you. I don't care how good you are. We led the Big Ten in pass defense efficiency this year in Big Ten games only. But we still had about a 50 or 52% completion percentage on us. So in other words, we're still going to get a lot of opportunities to strip the ball. We think that that's very, very important when you're teaching pass defense too. We think it's important. Our goal is always to lead the conference in touchdown passes against us. And we think that if you can go 7 or less, that's pretty good. And then those things improve long ball skills, squeeze down zone play, pressure defense, all those things are important in trying to accomplish that goal. Lead in yardage per attempt. We think if you're around 6.0 per attempt, that you're going to be pretty good. Because that's a figure that, you know, if all the people that lead in all those categories, national stats and all that, will be 6 or under probably on per attempt. So we think that's very important. To be able to do that, you can't have any long balls. You've got to make plays on intermittent throws consistently, and you can't miss tackles after they get an interception, because that goes on your passing yardage. Lead the league in third down defense. We think that's very, very important. This year we were 76%, I believe, on third down and long, and we think that is very, very good. If you could be that high. We were about 42% or 40% on third down and short. We don't think that'll do it. We think you've got to be somewhere around 70% effective, or a little over 70% on any third down situation. I think that's got to be a part of your plan. You've got to do that. Now, you can be very good on those critical situations and not very good on the first and second down sometimes. So I don't mean that's something that you spend all your time in, but if you're going to be a good secondary, you got to be able to play good possession down defense. We think, and I know this is what our secondary coach tells our guys all the time, we may not be the best. Once again, we may not be the fastest, we may not be the biggest, but we can be the best disguised secondary in the nation, because it does not take a great player to disguise what he's doing. You know, if he's disciplined, if he understands what you want him to do, you can have a great disguised secondary. And there are very many different ways to disguise. And we do 2 or 3, but basically, our disguise is we want to line up in what looks like a 2-deep secondary most of the time. And then we want to kick that coverage into whatever that we're going to be in on the snap of the ball. Now sometimes, of course, they get you in certain offensive sets that you've got to go ahead and deploy your people. You've got to show your coverage a little bit more. Then you've got to be prepared, we think, to go back to one of the other basic things I talked to you about disruptive receivers. You know, sometimes they put those guys all out over the field. You have to show the coverage that you're in. And then I think it becomes very, very important that you got people up there on them where you can disrupt them and bang them when they come off the line of scrimmage. Once again, the 20 looks what we like. Individual movement, we like that at times too, especially when we're playing a lot of man. You know, we may be some ball games, we may play more man. And Then the disguise comes off of that. In other words, they crawl up there like they're playing man, and then they back out, or they back out like they're playing zone, and they crawl up on the snap of the ball. We think that's important. We think it's very important to bait, what we call bait and bluff. And each guy, each individual guy within his zone can bait. And by that we mean make the quarterback think that you're doing something that you're not, something else. In other words, you can be a free safety playing a good sound basic 3-deep zone. Okay? But when the ball is snapped, you can bait that quarterback into thinking that you're rolling into a half or something else. You know. And we use that term all the time, bait. Learn what you can do. A strong safety's got the flat. You know, a lot of times he can break through the flat, plant his outside foot, come back inside and intercept the curl. That's what we call a bait technique. Or he can hang in that curl like he's playing that and break outside and play the flat. We think that's very important. Corners can do it when they're rolled up. Linebackers can do it. Everybody can do that. You have to teach them what you want them to do. Don't get it stereotyped, but convince them that they got some tools that they can use. And then, you know, I think they're all kind of hams anyway, and they like that when they think they can fool somebody. So we think that that's very, very important. Bait and bluff. Bluff, in our terminology, is a team concept. In other words, if we're going to bluff something, we add that to the defense. We may say slant strong, 20 sky, bluff. And that means that we're going to play slant strong, we're going to play 20 sky, and we're going to bluff. In other words, we're going to line up in something like we're playing man, and then we're going to bail out of that play or something. So we've got a few terms that we use that we think that are descriptive terms that our players understand, and we think we can get plays out of it. We think this, once again, we may not be the best, we may not be the fastest and all that, but we can be the best effort secondary there is. And that's a goal, you know. In other words, that's 7 basic goals that we try to get those guys to really believe in. And we think if they do that, then you got a chance. They got a chance to become a pretty good secondary. Once again, those are goals that they've got to understand and that they've got to believe in. Okay, we're basically a zone team. There's no question about that. Down through the years, we've always been a zone team. And we think that, you know, in our opinion, that's best for us. We have been able to recruit a little more speed. We got 4 great kids from Texas this year. And it's quite conceivable that within the next 2 or 3 years, we can have an all-Texas defensive secondary. Every one of our guys could be from the state of Texas, because we've got a great one. We've got 2 or 3 great kids now. We recruited 2 good ones this year. A kid from Bartlett that we recruited, and a kid from here in Dallas named Kerry Cooks. We think it's going to be a really good defensive back. But we believe that, you know, you've got to have good people back there. General zone principles. Here's the things that we believe. And I mean, we've got to teach our linebackers, our defensive ends, our secondary people these things. That before the snap, determine what problems might develop from the formation. That goes back to formation recognition. We spend hours, and I know you guys do too, on formation recognition. You know, I mean with everybody, the secondary, the linebackers, because they got to make the calls, they got to make a lot of the adjustments. There are a lot of formations that present you with certain problems. You know, before the snap, you've got to be aware of those particular problems. In other words, they may be in a trip set, a slot trip set, and that inside receiver may be their key receiver. He may be great on running outs or curls or whatever, but they must identify those particular problems by formation before the ball is snapped. That takes a lot of work on the coach's part, and it takes a lot of work on the defensive back's part too. Vision. See the quarterback and field receivers in your zone. Master wide vision to position yourself for threats and still see the quarterback. And you know, I believe that we do as good as anybody on trying to teach, watch the quarterback, anticipate the throw, break over the ball. Now that's very simple, but that's a basic prerequisites of being a good zone football team. You've got to watch the quarterback, you've got to anticipate the throw, and you've got to break on the ball. I've been coaching a long time, like I said, and I've never seen very many quarterbacks that can look here and throw there. You know, they just can't do it. They don't do it. There's a lot of them that look off good and then come back. I'm not saying that, but when it comes down to time to release the ball, most of them step and they go through that motion that tells you that they're fixing to release the ball. If you are a good zone pass defender, you are always moving before that ball gets in the air. And if you're not, then you're going to always be a step late. You're going to get there close, you're going to make a great hit a lot of times. But you're generally going to be a step late. So we think it's very important to vision, see the quarterback. You know, you got to be conscious of receivers too. It's not an easy job, man, as you know. You got to know where receivers are. There's a lot of things that help you. The formation told you where they might come from. You studied the quarterback all during the week on his actions, you know, to give you a tip. And then you got to know where the middle of your zone is, where your zone, the regions of your zone, so you don't extend too far into your buddy's zone and so on. But all those things are important. It comes down to great vision. 2 or 3 simple rules that we followed forever. If 2 people come in my zone, split the difference. If one is in my zone, cheat to him. In other words, if I'm playing a deep half, for instance, and I got 2 deep receivers in my zone, in that deep half of my field, then I've got to split the difference between those 2. If there's only one receiver in that deep half or deep third or fourth or whatever I'm responsible for, then I can cheat to him. In other words, I can be a little bit closer to him. But you've got to know that, and it's got to be practice on. Cushion, deep defenders must keep a 4-yard cushion on deep threats, and you got to be able to turn and sprint if he breaks the cushion. Turn and sprint if he breaks the cushion. You play people like Miami and Colorado and people like that with those people, they're going to break that cushion on you now at times. So, you know, then it ends up that you've got to have enough speed, or hopefully you've got enough speed that you can get on back there. But if you have never violated your cushion rule, you know, they may throw some in front of you. But that's another prerequisite of being a good zone pass defense team, too. You can't panic and start trying to make that zone do certain things that it's not supposed to do. In every zone coverage, there is some kind of weakness somewhere in it. You've got to know those weaknesses and identify them, and you can't panic if they hit you in those particular weaknesses. So what do? You can't let them keep moving the ball down the field in a particular thing. And then you use your bait, you use your bluff, or you change the coverage. And if you're a good disguised team and they're hurting you with a certain thing, and you've got a coverage you can change to it. Once again, it may be a subtle change, something where you just exchange whoever's playing the flat or the curl, and then you got a chance to come up with a big play. Those things are very, very important. Anytime that you're faced with an out or a stop, behind every out or stop, look for a flag by number 2. In other words, you know, you get guys that, boy, they get real good. Those corners, if you're playing a 3 deep or something like that, they get good on those outs and stops. Those people upstairs see that too. So they've got to know, one of our basic rules is that behind every stop, there's a potential flag route by an inside receiver, number 2. Hooker post, look for a trailer. The first year we went to Iowa, they had not won 5 games. They had not had a winning season in 18 years. We play Indiana the first ball game. The first ball game. We got those guys 26-3 at the half. And I mean, our players are celebrating, the fans are celebrating. They think it's all over. Well, we knew it wasn't, because we knew what we were playing with at the time. But they come out in about the middle of the 4th quarter, and they come back. They were in position to win, and they come out, and we're in a basic 3-deep secondary. They run a little curl pattern to the inside. Our corner jumps on it. Here comes a trail route out of the back. He throws it down there. They get the touchdown. They beat us 29-26 or something like that right at the last of the ball game. But that brought it all back to me again, because we work on that all the time. But for every hook or post, look for a trade. Two in the zone, once again, you got two people in your zone, you got to be as deep as the deepest. That's a basic rule. And react up. Once again, don't try to make that zone coverage do. You got to be as deep as the deepest. That's a basic rule. And react up. Once again, don't try to make that zone coverage do something it's not designed to do. If nobody comes in your zone, continue to get your depth and look for somebody crossing into it. You know, the worst thing you can do is avoid the zone too quickly. Now, we don't want to cover air. Don't misunderstand it. And that goes back to the basic old rule. You got to be as wide as the widest, and as deep as the deepest. And but you got to know those kind of things so you can remember. If nobody comes in your zone, hey man, somebody's probably going to be coming in from the other side. Don't cover air and cheat as the quarterback moves. Drift in the direction it's moving. But once again, that goes back to anticipating the throw. And I really believe if you're going to be a zone pass defense, you know, if you're going to base your stuff on being a zone pass defense, then you've got to adhere to those basic principles, and you've got to practice them and practice them and practice them, and you'll get better at it. Then the closer they get to the goal line, zone principle, you know, the better your pass defense ought to get, because now you don't have to cover so much ground. So those are just basic things right there that we think are very, very important when you're starting out with your secondary, and things that you've got to be sure that you teach them. There's a thought progression that all defensive backs have got to go through. And I think you've got to teach that thought progression in an orderly manner, you know, whatever manner you want to teach it is. Like I said, once again, when you get out there under pressure, if you've been taught and trained to think in an orderly manner, then you're going to have a pretty good chance to bring it off under pressure. You're not going to fold under pressure, and I think that's very, very important. First of all is the call. Listen and get the entire call in the huddle. And that's one thing that defensive backs, and down through the years I know, have a tendency to do, because they're so anxious to get on back out, you know, and make their adjustments and all that kind of stuff, that sometimes, man, they leave the huddle too quickly. We may put a lightning call on the end or something, and they miss that. So it's very important that they get the entire call in the huddle. To help us on that, and nowadays, a lot of times, like I said, in the no huddle stuff, we let the secondary coach call it for them. But even in regular stuff now, a lot of times we let that secondary coach give the signal to those guys, so they don't have to, you know, they'll be in the huddle, but they get the signal from him too, and then they got a double chance to make sure it's right. Then they've got to align. They've got to recognize formations, communicate, and line up properly. And you guys that coach those guys know that's a big thing. Boy, you know, used to, when I was coaching the secondary, the head coach could say, okay, coach, take your guys off. I don't want to see you for 2 hours. Then you come back and we'll finish up practice. And if he did that, then I knew that I could have a 2-hour productive practice, because I could spend that much time every day if I needed to on adjustments. You know, like we were talking, some of the coaches here a while ago. You know, we used to start out with adjusting the 2 tight ends and a dead T backfield. Then we'd split an end out and put another guy out and so on. But now we generally start out and bring them back in. And you cannot do enough of that, making adjustments. And I think that's very, very important. Most of it comes down to recognizing the formation quick, having a good way you identify formations where everybody understands what trips is, spread, slot open, whatever you call it. But it's very, very important because they got to align and then go out there and line up. And now, too, see, you got to disguise it now. You got to disguise it, so they've got to know what their adjustment's going to be, and then they've got to be able to disguise it and all that kind of stuff. So that's the order that they think. Get the call, get out there and make my alignment. Stance. Take a good stance every play. You know, used to, boy, we used to have, you got to be at this, you got to have 40, no wider than your shoulders, heel, toe, stagger, all those kind of things. Don't misunderstand, those things are important. But that's different for every guy. Some of them like to be with a 1 foot back, some of them like to be with the other foot back. But the most important thing is that they take a good, comfortable stance that they can operate out of, and that they do that thing the same every time. Because a good quarterback watches that stuff too. You know, it doesn't take him long to figure that a right corner, for instance, if he's cocked back inside, his foot placement may tell whether he's a funnel guy or whether he's going to back off and play a soft flat or whatnot. It's especially important with the deep people. You know, I don't care if they got their outside foot back or their inside foot back, but I want to make sure that it's the same foot back every time. Shuffle, you know, we work on that all the time. Our secondary coach does that all the time. Shuffle a couple of steps back, read, and go. We've always said this. Your first move, it's not how quick you make the first move, it's how accurate you make the first move. You know, because once again, you got a little time back there too. You know, talk about the worst thing you can do is make a bad first move. If you go wrong and then have to redirect, I think that's very hard. So we want to get that shuffle down where we're going to make a good first move. Key runner pass and the type of runner pass. Hey, all there is to defensive football, recognition, is recognizing quickly if it's a runner pass. And then what kind of runner pass is it? You know, that's oversimplified, but that's what it is. But the faster that takes place, the quicker that takes place, then the better off you're going to be. So they've got to do that. We've got a very, very simple rule to determine runner pass again, too. You know, we look through people and all that, but we have a very, very simple rule to determine runner pass again, too. You know, we look through people and all that, but we don't tell our guys to, you know, key linemen, all that kind of stuff in the back end. If the ball is on the line of scrimmage in the hands of the quarterback, it's a run. It's that simple. If the ball's off the line of scrimmage in the hands of anybody other than the quarterback, it's run. If the ball's off the line of scrimmage in the hands of the quarterback, it's pass. Now, all these guys play pass first, you know, always. That never has changed. But I'm talking about the short zone guys. If you're a strong safety playing a sky coverage, you know, you got the flat or you got primary run support if the play comes your way. If the ball's off the line of scrimmage in the hands of the quarterback your way, it's run. You get up there. If they throw it in the flat, they throw it. If the ball's in the off the line of scrimmage in the hands of anybody other than the quarterback, you get up there. If they throw a halfback pass in the flat, you just got to call. But that's as simple as we think we can make it. If the ball's off the line of scrimmage in the hands of the quarterback, it's passed. It may be a draw play or something like that, but that's not your responsibility. Eligibles. Locate the eligible receivers in your area, whether they are receivers or blockers. And that's very, very important because every offensive running play generally is designed to block every defensive play. And I think the worst mistake you can make as a secondary coach is you're always practicing positions, tackling, all those things we're talking about, recognizing run or pass, but you don't practice enough at times, and I know I did when I was coaching. You don't practice enough getting off the block. And there's always going to be a blocker down here. Most of them are little guys, and you know, we play Michigan every year, and they are the worst or best, however you look at it. If you're an offensive coach, they're the best. If you're a defensive coach, they're the worst about blocking you, grabbing you, intimidating you, believe it or not, wide receivers intimidating you, all that kind of stuff. But there's always somebody on you for those guys, and you got to get off of it and be able to make the play. Responsibility, execute your responsibility according to what's coming at you. Once again, you execute your responsibility if it's a pass, if it's a bootleg pass, if it's a sprint pass, if it's a play action pass. You execute your responsibility if it's a run, if it's a trap, if it's an option, if it's a sweep, whatever it is. But you've got to be able to do that. We think that thought process then, in that order, is very, very important. And I think that when you're talking to your group, that's the way you present your defenses. In other words, the first thing you start out teaching a new coverage. What's it called? Give them the call. Then, where did I line up? What's the stance I use? What's my responsibility? You talk to them like that in an orderly fashion, and then, you can communicate with them during the course of the ball game. Okay, if that's true, then communications are very, very important when you're coaching the secondary or anything, but especially in the secondary, because a missed communication can cost most of the time. Whenever you watch a ball game and you see a total bust, where it's just somebody running down there free, and you think, goodness, how could that happen? It probably happened to you. It's happened to me and everything else. And I would say that 70% of the time, when that happens, it's a miscommunication. The other 30% may be somebody just busted the assignment because he thought he was doing it right and he didn't. Most of the time, it's a miscommunication. So communications is vital to our success if we're to be a good secondary. Now, formation recognition. Some key formation recognition that everyone is responsible for. In other words, that goes back to what I was talking about. Recognize the formation and the key to that formation. Slot trips. What is it? 70% run, 30% pass. It's 80% run to the tight end. Those kind of things are important. But these guys have got to know it. They've got to communicate them to their buddies. They've got to be able to communicate it to their buddies. They got to recognize splits by the wideouts. I don't think that's so important to them, what it is, because it may give them a tip before the ball snaps as to what play is going to be run. But it's very important to those inside guys so they don't get killed. Those defensive ends, those linebackers, sometimes a strong safety that's playing short. It's very important that the guys recognize those splits and then they can communicate it back to the people that are going to get cracked on. So that's very important. Run support calls. We have to make a run support call every time we line up. In other words, if we're in our basic defense and they run a play to the tight end side, then we have to know if it's a sweep or an option play, who is the primary run support guy. And in our terminology, primary run support means the first guy to the line of scrimmage that turns the play back to the inside. That's primary run support. It may be an end, it may be a defensive back, but that's got to be called. And if we make them strictly by, we have a call. In other words, if we say veer, if it's a veer call, that means that a defensive back and a defensive end are going to read the release of the tight end to determine run responsibility. In other words, the tight end blocks down, maybe the end takes the quarterback, corner comes up on the pitch. If the tight end releases, it may be just the opposite. But they've got to make those calls. If it's a pitch call, we're telling the defensive ends when the thing is made in the huddle that it is a pitch. You got to pitch. I don't care what they do. In other words, they come out in the pro and we say, okay, we're going to play 20 sky pitch. That means they run an option play, the end's got to pitch. And then everybody back down the line knows what their responsibility is. But the communication of the thing is very, very important. Fade and bluff, we've always talked about that. Some motion, you got to watch for motion. Some formation are motion formations. Now, when you get to talking about motion, you got all kinds of options here as to what you want to do as far as motion adjustments are concerned. We always break it down, try to break it down simply this way. There are two ways you can adjust the motion. You can adjust the best way, or you can adjust the easy way. Okay, the best So you got to make, right there, you've got to make a decision on how you want to adjust the motion. In other words, when that guy goes to motion, what are your guys going to do? Well, you know, you've got, ours go basically on fitting the front, you know, whatever front we're in, then the secondary's got to fit that. That's all got to be communicated by them. In other words, they're playing one thing, and when that motion starts, they're either going to change the coverage or they're going to hang with what they got. And all that stuff has got to be communicated. But certain formations alert them to that. In other words, if they put, you know, a lot of teams, if they put the formation into the boundary, then you can, 70% of the time, you know they're coming with motion to the wide side of the field. Those guys have got to know that. They're thinking about that before the ball snaps, and when it happens, you know, then they've already made their decision, and they can do that a lot better. We think it's very, very important to call out what you see. Run, 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 pass, pass, pass. Simplest thing in the world, isn't it? And, you know, everybody, you know, we want to do that, but that's got to be practical. It's got to be something that you do constantly. We know this. If we are going to be a secondary that lines up on receivers and bangs those guys and beats on them and tries to disrupt them, then you doing that, you do a lot of things to help you, but you also become vulnerable to certain other things. In other words, if they come out in a spread formation, and to us a spread formation is a tight end flanker and somebody in the slot on the weak side. If you want to line up on that slot back and bang him and beat him, you know, that's great. But then you become vulnerable to somebody from the outside running an under route, or an in route, as we call it. So, but we still think that you can get by with that kind of stuff if you communicate properly. In other words, if I'm banging on a guy, I'm banging on him basically to keep him from getting down there on my deep guy too quick. And especially if we're playing a half coverage, you know, where we're playing a half with a guy and you got two receivers coming down. We want to bang those receivers because in all my coaching, the hardest thing I've ever had to coach was playing a half of the field when two receivers came down there deep. And the way used to scare me out of a two deep coverage the quickest was just line up in a pro formation and run the tight end down the middle and put the two wide guys on the boundary. And I mean, you scared me out of running 20 coverage right quick. But if you bang on those guys coming off, it's not so bad. But like I said, if I'm going to bang that tight end coming off so he can't get down there quick, then I'm opening myself up for stuff coming from the inside. So it's very important then that we call those things. In other words, that corner sees that guy coming back inside. He starts hollering in. Now that guy that's banging on that next receiver to the inside knows, hey, I got a guy coming inside, so I've got to come off. But it's not too bad for me to come off now because I had to lift my deep guy back there with two receivers getting down there deep. Same thing on curl routes, you know. Call out the route. Curl. Lets that linebacker know that it's coming. Out. Those kind of things. Screens. You know, boy, when they run a screen on us, if somebody yells screen immediately, then we've got a chance. I mean, because our whole premise on defense and the screen is that it's a team thing. Everybody's got to recognize screen. And the fastest that we can recognize it, because you know how those linemen are, I mean, you know, most of those guys, they don't know what backfield set is or anything else. All they're interested in is lining up on that guy, whipping him to get to the ball. But if they hear scream, then man, they stop all that stuff they're doing. They get down that line of scrimmage, you got a chance. So it's very, very important. Draw plays, reverses, all those kind of things. We think it's very important that your guys be able to communicate to their buddies what's fixing to happen to them or what is happening to them. In our system right there, we've got a few basic techniques that we have to master. Our corners, for instance, all of our corners, we mess around with a lot of different things. Sometimes we play a boundary corner, sometimes we play a wide field corner, you know, depending on personnel, all that kind of stuff. But they have got to learn how to play a deep third, okay? They've got to learn how to play a deep fourth, because we play a lot of four deep stuff now, man. people start getting down close to the goal line, inside the 20, we always play a 4 deep if we stay in the zone. Because we know now, you know, if they spread all those people out, start running those people down, that, and I've been a 3 deep guy all my life. I believed in it, and I believe in all those principles. And I know that if they run a guy down deep on each side of that free safety and 2 people outside wide, that they got a chance of completing that pass. Anytime they run 4 receivers deep, they got a chance of completing that pass, especially if they throw it on time and all. But they don't have much of a chance to complete that pass if you're in 4 across, especially the closer you get to the goal line. So our corners, they've got to learn to play a 3 deep. I'm talking about deep zones. They've got to learn how to play a 4. Very seldom do we ever ask them to play a half. The only reason that we don't corner would ever play a half is just maybe he's a good nickel back or something like that, we put him in. That would be occasionally, and that's why I put it in there, you know, that he may have to, but they've got to learn that, and then they've got to learn how to funnel when they're lined up on people's corners, you know. That's very, you know, that he may have to, but they've got to learn that, and then they've got to learn how to funnel when they're lined up on people's corners, you know. That's very important. If you take an outside position on him, what are you doing with him if he comes off the line of scrimmage, if you're responsible for the flat? And then they've got to learn how to play man-to-man. You know, nowadays, we play that more, and our secondary coach works on that every day now. I mean, most of the time with the offensive people. But those are the techniques of the corners. Strong safety. In our system, the strong safety is the man. He's the key guy. He calls everything. He makes all the calls, all the checks, all those kind of things. He's responsible for a lot of different things. He needs to be a tough guy, but he's got to be a guy capable of playing any deep zone that he needs to play. He's got to be a curl. He's got to learn to play the curl to the flat. He's got to play a deep 4th, a deep half. He's got to play a deep 30 times if you use a strong roll, and he's got to be a man-to-man player too. So that's an important techniques that those guys have got to learn. Free safety. Man, those guys have got to be great players. They got to play the deep middle, the deep half. They got to play man-to-man at times. They got to put Robert down there. That's just a change-up that we use. But that means they've got to play a lot of different things. They got to learn to play a 4th and all those things. These are things that on your checklist, you know, that you got to make sure that they understand. Because, as you guys know, I don't care if you're playing a 3rd or a half or whatnot, your landmarks change. That ball is on the hash mark in the middle of the field, so on. So if I've got to learn to play 3 deep zones, 3 kinds of deep zone coverages, then I better understand how my zones relate to the position the ball is on the field. And then to make it even a little more complicated, how my zones relate to when there's nobody in my zone or there's 2 people in my zone and so on. So those are things that those guys have got to do. Okay. Sometimes these things don't show up. I believe that's not too bad, though. Maybe you see some of that. Objectives of secondary play. All right, deny the long pass. No question about that. Technique, discipline within the responsibility and ball skills. To be a good deep player, you know, I gotta have good technique and all that kind of stuff. I've got to have discipline within my responsibility, but I got to have great ball skills. And you can't practice those things enough. Deny long runs, stovepipe position, team tackling, swarms of ball, disruption of wide receivers, and so on, all those things that I've already been over. Those are things that you got to teach those guys individually all the time. Some of this stuff is a little bit repetitive maybe, but okay. Now these are things too that I know our guy always works on with his people. Secondary play, react without thinking. Boy, you know, like I said, we spend half of our practice time making adjustments with these guys and making sure that they know where to line up and all that. But a defensive guy that has to, and especially a secondary player, and I know that it's hard to do this, But you got to be able to get out there and react without thinking on it too much. In other words, there can't a bunch of things be running through your mind that keeps you from turning loose and being able to play. So to be able to do that, you've got to simplify it to a few basic techniques and tasks or things that they've got to learn. Primarily, we are this. We have always been, if I had to say our basic coverage would have been a weak roll, quarter, half coverage. In other words, the strong safety is a quarter, the boundary, the strong corners are a quarter, free safety is a half player, and the weak side corner roll. That's been our basic coverage. But now, with the way things have evolved, as far as we're concerned, our basic coverage now would be a 2-deep coverage. In other words, we're playing half the field, and in order now would be a 2-deep coverage. In other words, we're playing half the field, and in order to do that, we have got to be able to adjust that coverage to anything they come up with, to a pro set, to a slot set, to a spread set, to trips, to no backs, or whatever. So we have tried to simplify things to get it down to the point where we're basically a 2-deep team and a 3-deep team. And 2-deep includes being able to play quarter, halves, as well as just straight halves too. Establish clear objectives and teach concept of coverage. I think that's very important for everybody on your football team. In other words, your linebackers got to understand the entire concept of your coverage, as well as your defensive ends, as well as your secondary. All those things we think are very, very important. Now, the next thing, spend more time on what you do and less on what the opponent does. What do you think about that just for a minute? Like I told you earlier, that's always been probably my worst enemy, is that thought process being the other way. You know, you got to spend more time on what you do and less time on what your opponent does. In other words, you got to have everything down like you want to do it, and to heck with what he does, because he may do something different. So everything has got to be done that way. Basic yet flexible scheme. Adjust to a variety of offenses. You know, we say keep it as simple as you can, and that's great. But you guys sitting here know as well as I do, because you coach defense. Offensive people won't let you keep it all that simple anymore. I mean, they might to a certain extent, but, you know, they've got the first move. It's like a chess game or checker game. You know, they make the first move, and then you got to deploy. So they don't let you keep things all that simple anymore. So your scheme has got to be very, very flexible so it can adjust to a variety of offenses. And then once again, it's got to be such that they understand it and they get out there and make those adjustments without having to think a whole lot about what they're doing. Spend most time correcting flaws and not scouting opponents. In other words, I don't know if you guys have access to it. We do, and it's great. But you know, you can film a lot of your practice sessions. And then what you got to do, I think, is correct those things that you see out there in practice, instead of spending all your time on looking at the other guy, you know, what he's doing. In other words, a lot of times we go in after practice, the first thing I want to do is go look at tape or get who we're playing, instead of getting there and looking at the tape of what we did during practice. And I think that's very, very important. If you do have the ability to film those things, then you got to use them. And just don't change week to week. Continue continuity. Promotes improvement. I think that's good. I keep repeating that, but that's very, very important. Okay, here's something that I think is one of the best things that we have done down through the years. First of all, drill philosophy. Okay, drills, you know, I know a lot of times when you come to things, you don't like to hear drills. You want circles and ovals and all that, and I'm the same way. But our drill philosophy is this: fundamental skills must be taught and polished constantly. No question about that. Practice must be in a familiar routine, no surprises. In other words, they got to know what you're doing. Use drills that are familiar familiar and allow physical progress. In other words, changing drills every day, that's good. Sometimes you think, gosh, football gets boring, I got to change. But still, it always takes time to explain those things. Spend enough time on each drill to make an impact. I was reading something, I think, by Bill Walsh. Spend enough time on each drill to make an impact. I was reading something, I think, by Bill Walsh. He's considered to be a great organizer and all that kind of stuff. And I was reading it today, and he said this: no drill or no technique can be taught in less than 10 minutes. And anything over 20 minutes is too long. And that made a lot of sense to me. If you're going to set up something and you got to work on it, a particular thing, he said, you got to do it at least 10 minutes. And then if you go any longer than 20, it becomes counterproductive. You got to prioritize drills, have a weekly plan for using them. You got to use competition when possible. Always explain the tempo that you want. Don't allow improper technique, and evaluate each drill. Now, here's the thing that down through the years that I have done, and I've always thought this was the best way in the world to drill. And I'll explain it to you. As a defensive secondary coach, we always wanted to do a few drills every day. Back pedal, change body direction, zigzags, all the moves that you have to do to be a good defensive back. And we used to line up, and we would go through them. We may get 2 lines, or go 3 at a time, or whatever, and we'd back pedal. And then we'd do the change direction drills, zigzags, or whatever we wanted to do. We had about 5 of them down there that we really liked to do, because we thought they were productive drills. They made you do the drills that you do during the course of the ball game. Made you get in the body positions that you had to do during the course of the ball game. And then I got to thinking. I said, why don't we incorporate those drills with something else too? I mean, those things with something else too, so we get a lot more production out of it. So I started doing this. I started taking a secondary. I'd say, okay, I'll take the number 1 secondary, put them out there on the field. Take the numbers 2 secondary and tell them, you got to make the formation that I give to you. And then I'd make a secondary coverage call, and I'd say, okay, number 1 secondary, you've got to adjust 20 coverage to whatever formation we show out there. And then I may tell the number 2 secondary, I'd say, okay, you guys line up in a trips to one side. And I'd say, okay, the call is slant 20. And the secondary had to look out there, recognize the formation, line up properly, make all the calls that are involved, get lined up perfectly to that formation, and then we would do the drill. And take them, and they would do the back pedal drill, but they'd be in the position that you wanted them in as far as the coverage is concerned. They didn't go to responsibility then. They just made the alignment. They recognized the formation, and then I'd back pedal them right there. Then when I had them back pedaling, they may be in a 3 deep coverage with strong safeties up. The other 3 guys are back, but they're doing a back pedal drill. Then I'd throw the ball, and we'd go through all those basic things that you got to do playing zone pass defense. What do I do if I'm the first man there? Well, we always say if I'm the first man there, then I've got to holler ball and make the interception. To us, ball means I've got it. It doesn't mean the ball's in the air. Ball means I've got it. What does the second guy do? Well, we've always said if you're the second guy there, you've got to break down and look to the tip first. That's the first thing you look for. You're sprinting to the ball. Your buddy hollers ball. You honor that call, but you break down and look for the tip. And then, if the tip occurs, you've alerted yourself to it, and you'll make the play. We say we should get every tip ball. We don't do it all the time, but we should get every tip ball. He breaks down and looks for the tip. What's the third guy do? He do it all the time, but we should get every tip ball. He breaks down and looks for the tip. What's the third guy do? He blocks the intended receiver. What's the fourth guy do? He gets in front of the ball carrier and leads him downfield. What have we done with that drill? First of all, we did the simple drill of backpedaling, but we made an adjustment. We made a call, and then we went through all the basic zone fundamentals. When they finished, they intercepted the ball and run past me. Then number 2 gets out there, and number 3 steps up and makes the formation. And then number 1 watches it. And you go through the same procedure. Only this time with number 2, you may put the ball on the hash mark and say, okay, number 3, make the spread formation to the field. And you may say, tell your other secondary, okay, line up in an eagle 30 sky. So they got to recognize the formation, they've got to make their alignment, then they go through the drill. Maybe this drill is backpedaling and changing directions. But I found this out too. Offensive people very seldom ever bust the formation. And I watch our offensive people, and I talk to them after the game, and I don't hear them saying, this guy lined up in the wrong place. He didn't bust the formation. And then I asked him, I said, why do you think why is that? And, the offensive coach said, it's simple. They make the formation all the time, so they don't bust it. Well, then I got to thinking, hey, what am I always talking to secondary people about? Recognizing formation. How's the best way to recognize the formation? Make the formation. We've never done that. They've never made a formation. I'd draw the formation up on the board and say identify. We've never done that. They've never made a formation. I'd draw the formation up on the board and say identify. That's the way they learned it. But when I took them and started making formations, their identification process improved 100%. They got better and better at identifying formations. So that made sense to me. So ever since then, that's the way we do. Now, you can take, maybe you got a 7-minute agility period every day, whatever it is. You can get all of your secondaries through those 5 drills at least once and maybe twice, and all during that drill you made a formation, you made all your calls that you needed to, and then you practiced all the ball skills that you talked to them about, reading the quarterback's eyes, anticipating the throw, break on the ball, first man there, second man there, all those things that you never have enough time to do. You've done those things over and over again, and it became very, very productive. And I've always thought that was, like I said, that's a very good way to do it. And that's just the way we do it. It's been pretty good for us. Well, he says I don't have much time left. All coverages look alike to us. Like I said, we're going to line up first. We're going to try to line up in that look most of the time. That basic 20 look or 2 deep look right here. I don't care what we're in, if we're playing our eagle defense, if we're playing a base defense or whatnot. But we want the secondary to line up in that particular look most of the time. And then, if we're playing our quarter, half, or weak roll, then on the snap of the ball, this guy kicks it to here, he comes back and plays a half. These guys get into the proper position to play the force, and that's the way they play. In this particular coverage, our defensive ends got to play. If we're going to play a 3D coverage, we're going to line up like that, bring that guy up, bring these guys back to play their thirds, and all that. We're going to play a 2D coverage, the same thing. Now, we may line up in a 3D look and kick to those others, but basically we want to line up just exactly like this on everything that we possibly can and kick the coverages after the play starts. And if you can do that, if these guys line up properly, then you got a chance, I think, to go back and make that quarterback do the things that to read everything after the ball was snapped. I think my time is up, and hopefully, maybe I gave something that you might have gotten some good out of. I didn't get into circles and O's all that much because generally when you talk like this, you go over a few things. You don't have that much time anyway. And all the things that I talk to you about are things that we do all the time that we've done that time anyway. And all the things that I talk to you about are things that we do all the time that we've done down through the years we think are very, very important. Hey, you guys are Texans. If you ever get a chance, come up to Iowa and visit with us. We've had several come up down through the years. When I went to work yesterday morning, it was minus 6 degrees. I was down here recruiting in Austin 3 or 4 weeks ago, probably about 4 weeks ago. And, I'd forgotten I'd been out of the States quite a while. And the guy said, hey, it's 57 degrees down here. We're all freezing. And I thought I'd just hit a heat wave. But you guys are always welcome to our place. Like I said, we've recruited a lot of good players out of here. Thank you very much for your attention.